American President, dear European Union. This is Günther Fellinger-Jan speaking. I'm calling here from Vienna to recognize the Republic of Biafra. Biafra in ex-Nigeria, Nigeria, to my regret, and this is a non-working state, and they have committed genocide in 1967 to 1970 against the Christians of Biafra and the people of Biafra, and now they are all well, since the last 15 years, living in terrible conditions. They are often led for some jihadists to kill them, and there is atrocities about atrocities. And it's much better for the people of Nigeria if Biafra becomes their own state, and they can sort out then inside Nigeria the other issues, or maybe there will be other regions which are better off in this non-working state of Nigeria. So ex-Nigeria must start with Biafra, and the international community, contrary to the 1960s and 70s, must support the independence of Biafra Republic. In the 1967-90, that tragic years, the West was at its weakest. There was the Vietnam War, and tragically Nixon, who was positive for the people of Biafra, but he did very little, and I want to apologize for his failures, and I want to especially criticize and also apologize for the imperial UK and French governments who were actually supporting, due to all interests, Nigerian centralists' crackdown on the poor people of Biafra. And we, as Christians, as Europeans, should absolutely stand with Biafra and support them. And that's why I call on President Trump and on the European leaders, Ursula von der Leyen, please, I beg you, I pray, recognize the Republic of Biafra. It's no need for military intervention or these things. Just do the political steps of recognition of these poor people to have their own state, to live in security, and of course then recognition goes with the ability to be recognized and also to defend yourself. It's much better than having a military intervention in Nigeria, having the Biafra Republic equipped and armed to be able to defend herself against the potential invasion from the Nigerian centralist forces of that failed state. And so here the defense comes with the recognition, and that's exactly how we should do. Biafra Republic, please, my friends, I beg you, recognize it and build a strong, viable state, part of the free world. And that's what I call the Fellinger doctrine and also the Fellinger economics. And build a decent state, part of the free world, no BRICS, but OECD, no kind of alignment with genocidal Russia, but alignment with America, with the European Union, with the free world. And we will have a free trade agreement, open economics, of course the flat tax, I like very much, and the currency, which Nigeria never did, to join the Euro-Pact area. This is the best policy for West Africa, and Biafra will be a proud member of the Euro-Pact area, and this will be delivering much more prosperity in the future, and we will trade and we will work together.
Again, the purpose of this event is to try to make sure that the Congress of the United States, the administration of this country, our friends and allies around the world, and not least, of course, people of goodwill in this country and elsewhere, are on notice that Nigeria is at risk of disastrous collapse, that the forces that we've just been talking about are in the process of taking down a country that is the most populous in Africa, with horrific implications, not just for the immediate vicinity, the Lake Chad region as it's known, but for that continent, and almost certainly others beyond. Congressman Wolf mentioned Bona, talking about a catastrophe that would make what has happened to Europe in the past few years, as a relatively small number of people migrated there with unbelievably chaotic consequences, look like a day at the beach by comparison. We're on notice. And the question is, do we have to wait until this horror is upon us before something is done about it? Or do we take steps now to try to prevent that? And I don't think any of us is saying that this is a panacea, but the appointment of the appropriate individual with the requisite authority. I just wanted to underscore what Congressman Wolf said about having the President of the United States essentially personally empowering Senator Danforth to lead the effort on behalf of our country to alleviate that situation. That has to be done again, and it has to be an empowering of a person with the stature and the capabilities needed to do two really vital things. One is to pull together the government agencies that have responsibility for pieces of a problem like Nigeria. The Defense Department, as well as, of course, the State Department, USAID, the UN mission of the United States, the National Security Council, and others, to come together with a common, appropriate, and much needed policy approach. And then secondly, at least as importantly, to be able authoritatively to represent what that approach is to the government of Nigeria. So they know who they're dealing with. They know that this is, in fact, the policy, and they can't go, looking for people who will provide some sort of alternative that might not require as much of them. So it's those two vitally important things that have to be done. And on behalf of, again, the Save the Persecuted Christians Coalition and team, I just want to say I think this is a moment of truth, a moment when we will find a difference being made by an administration that is about making a difference on behalf of religious freedom and those who are being denied it around the world. And let me just take a moment to say, as bad as this situation is, it is just one of the areas in the world in which particularly Christians are suffering. By some estimates, it's as small a number as 215 million Christians being brutally persecuted. By others, it's as high as 500,000. Excuse me, 500 million. This is on our watch. It is unconscionable. It must be challenged, contested, and if possible, stopped. And that's what this coalition is about. And I pray that we will be able, with the help of people like Congressman Estes and Congressman Bull and the Archbishop and our coalition and countless others, to see this problem sorted by the appointment at the earliest possible moment, preferably by the end of this year, because these elections are approaching, of an individual with the requisite authority of the President of the United States and the assignment of making both the U.S. government policy coherent and clear and effective and communicating that, again, authoritatively to the government of Nigeria, who in the end is ultimately responsible.
Very clearly and very something that we must understand, that it has become a global thing. Now we are seeing the reaction that the EU president is saying it, that the issue of self-determination must be resolved in accordance with the international law, and that the Biafran restoration and sovereignty is something that they have come to understand, and that is highly overdue, and they are going to take a decision which they have already taken. That's what the woman was actually saying, and he was saying this thing in the presence of the NATO chief, who was also present in that gathering, that they will not repeat 1967 stand on Biafra, but that this time around they are trying to get EU nations and EU leaders to look into and begin the process of recognition of Biafra as a sovereign nation. But currently now, the EU has agreed that Nigeria should be split, and that Biafra sovereignty should be something that has actually followed non-violent approach according to United Nations Charter, and they have come to a point that they have to recognize Biafra as a nation. Just like what Govt was saying always on social media, that he has taken up the case to the global community, to the global world, to the EU. And right from time, the EU has always taken a certain resolved resolution on the Biafran agitation, and has continued to question the rationale of Nigerian stand on international law that guides self-determination. One is Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's approach, non-violent approach to self-determination, and the issue that has to do with peaceful and solidarity movement of the IPOB that has been recognized all over the world. It is only in Nigeria that they manipulate and try to tarnish the image of IPOB. But outside Nigeria, IPOB is being celebrated as one of the largest, most peaceful self-determination movements. And that is what the EU president recently, made it very clearly that they are working out a lot of things in that regard with the United States government, with the British government, and then of course, let me use this opportunity to also alert you by May next year, the United States and United Kingdom will peacefully, sign a different charter that will lead to territorial recognition of Biafra as a sovereign nation outside Nigeria completely. This is another breaking news, which we must understand that of course a lot of things are being working out. It's not about Mazin Namdi Kanu, like Mazin Namdi Kanu will always say that it will take 250 years for you to be able to break the ranks and hierarchy and the secret of IPOB. IPOB is a formidable IPOB leadership is a formidable team, and that understand what it means by command and control. So if you look at what this, yes, another area, people who are still trying to come into the limelight, people who are carrying this assignment all over the world, are IPOB members, So if they are terrorists, I don't think that the world will be welcoming them. You can see what the EU president is saying. Currently now that already planned that within their context of agreement and commission and committee and resolutions are agreed on every meeting that was centered on the international resolve on Nigeria and Biafra and the quest for self-determination, that Biafra has already been granted and Nigeria automatically, has been disintegrated, and what they are waiting is the global recognition of Biafra and other modalities that would be worked out in terms of territorial integrity, and other factors that will interest that will come in later. So you can see what is actually playing on. But Nigerian government pretends over some of these, success that have been recorded as a result of the world coming together to show solidarity. You can see what is happening in the United States of America. The UK is even automatically silent and have been able currently now to disengage themselves from their from the northern political class, showing that that relationship between the North and the British government under Lord Lukard and all that might have expired 2014, and anything that happens in terms of their colony is no longer their business. You can see what is happening in Africa. In less than 4 years, over 10 African countries has been overrun by military governments. Democracy has continually collapsed, is collapsing in Africa. They fear that most of these military leaders, coup leaders, most of them are Muslims. And the threat is that, Africa can be recolonized again under Islamic governments. And the world is looking at, that this development might bring a total instability within Africa. And there's need for powerful nations like Biafra that should be given, support so that they'll be able to stand, and be able to create an atmosphere where other African countries of faith can are always running for refuge and live a better life. So those options are already on the table of EU and Asian powerful political class and leaders who have continuously deliberated on that. And remember, too, according to history, the Igbos are the sixth richest tribe in Africa and fourth most traveled tribe in Africa, in the world. Sixth richest tribe in the world. Fourth most traveled tribe in the world. So you can understand how this thing has continued to generate, diplomatic support, advancing interest and others. So when you see this kind of thing, you can see what's happening in the United States of America. That anytime, any day, United States government lands in Nigeria as a result of military intervention, and if there's going to be an uprising and the American lives and soldiers are being put into under northern Fulani jihadist attack, they will be left with no option than to disintegrate in Nigeria. And the NATO chief has, on the other side too, been pushing through relevant organizations and bodies and agencies of the government and the United Nations to have and look into the issue that backs self-determination about Biafra in Nigeria. So it's actually gathering global attention and global. So it will not be a surprise to anybody at any time that something like this can come up and people will not say, okay, we are not even aware that this kind of a thing has been going on underground. Yes, some Nigerian intelligence and politicians might be privileged to have access to this kind of information. But remember, just a few days ago, a man called Greg Peter Obi, who happens to be the Labour Party presidential candidate in 2023, has been busy for days now engaging international communities, European Union, speaking at different fora. They might not be purely a Biafran thing, but I can tell you, how the world look at the Igbo tribe, how the world recognizes the Igbo tribe, how the world see the Igbo tribe in Africa. They see them as the most sophisticated tribe, the most intelligent, industrial, innovative, and a tribe that have a lot to contribute to the development of leadership in Africa. So their image alone, just like when you talk about America, you say an American, the American watch on film and other. The Igbo man's image alone, has been able to spread in all the four corners of the earth, because there's no part of human endeavor you cannot find an Igbo man doing outstandingly very well. So kudos to those who are working, behind the scenes to see that the world. Today, everybody's talking about Biafra all over the world. They're talking about Biafra. How do they come? It comes as a result of the resolve, to escape what is coming, has been told by Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. It's a thing of joy where we start hearing that within the framework of the structure put in place, that the European Union has automatically and manually, whatever of the adjective you want to use, has disintegrated this entity, waiting for official pronouncement in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Smith, for convening this hearing. And I just want to recognize real quick the tremendous impact that Chairman Smith has had in this realm of human rights, Christian persecution over the decades. I'm a former staff member, actually, of this committee. I worked on this committee when Chairman Smith was on this committee. He had a very large impact on me as a staff member, and to come full circle back around to be on a hearing on such an issue that was really inspired by Chairman Smith's work here when I was a staff member. Thank you for that. And but I think one of the things that's, and I would say disheartening in this, hearing some of the media reporting and frankly, some of my colleagues on the other side of the dais here, is this misdirection of what is happening. There is a persecution of Christians in Nigeria. The witnesses have made that clear. We heard the bishop speak. I don't know how many times we have to hear it or how many reports of murdered, martyred Christians, my brothers and sisters in Christ in Nigeria, how many times we have to hear that happen to take it seriously. And one of the things that concerns me is that it feels like at times it's echoing an indifference around this, and somehow we're going to develop our way out of it through developmental programs, and this indifference sounds like echoes of Rwanda to me, where we did nothing on that. And I think, as you remember quite clearly, President Clinton has stated that as one of his largest failures in his administration. President Trump has made a definitive decision to actively engage and stop the killing in Nigeria, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. You all have used a word that I think is very apt in this, and this is prioritization. And as Chairman Smith put it perfectly in his opening statement of this hearing when he spoke with the senior officials of the Nigerian government, is that we do want to work with them. We have the opportunity here. I think the Nigerians have an opportunity to deepen and strengthen their relationship with the United States if they will prioritize the protection of these communities. Of course, non-Christians are being killed too. We're not saying that's not happening, but there is a systematic, targeted campaign that's happening here. I met with that same delegation, same as Chairman Smith did, and some of the feedback we were getting is a little bit of that same misdirection. But let's not turn a blind eye to what's happening. Let's not believe our lying eyes, right? One thing I'd want to point out here is we've had religious organizations and advocacy groups have been calling for humanitarian assistance in the Middle Belt region. And my understanding is that the Tinubu administration has not specifically requested it. That's why it's not there. They just have to ask for it, and our State Department will then provide that assistance to those organizations on the ground. That is a perfect example of prioritization and indifference to what is happening here. So that would be a great, to use your department's term, confidence-building measure on the part of the Tinubu government in this, if they are serious about this. Because I can promise you President Trump is. He is very serious about this. A question that I have for you is, the Nigerian Constitution prohibits the ownership of firearms. But somehow, these Fulani militants operating in the middle belt of region of the country, they're all armed. And we're not talking about ISIS. We're not talking about Boko Haram. Why hasn't there been some type of move or campaign by the Nigerian government to disarm these militants that are operating there, where we're seeing a lot of this killing that is coming from them? They have access to AK-47s and other small arms to slaughter Christians. Is this something that you've been talking to the Nigerian government about? Because I think it would actually have a serious impact, and it is something that I raised with the Nigerian government officials when we met with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Moore, and thank you also for your service on this task force that will be providing recommendations and your meetings with the Nigerian officials. Appreciate that. I think that this is an excellent suggestion as part of the strategy that we are putting together, in particular to talk about the policing aspect of this and what is happening in the Middle Belt, so that we can focus resources and have specific recommendations on actions that the Nigerian government can take. I very much appreciate that suggestion.
Yeah, it just seems to make all the sense in the world to me. It's like, here we are. I mean, I understand we're not going to get like ISIS to lay their arms down. That's probably more of a kinetic option there that's going to result in their arms no longer being brought up in anger against Christians. But in any event, this seems to be something that, obviously, I'm not saying it's easy, but it is something that they should be doing, they should be looking at. And while I got just a couple seconds left, I would urge the Nigerian government to take a look at pardoning Sunday Jackson, who is an individual who was fighting for his own life, defending his life against one of these Fulani militants. That Fulani militant lost his life in that struggle, and now that person, Sunday Jackson, is facing the death penalty. Now, where's the justice in that? Where is the justice in that? And all these Fulani militants are breaking the law. They are breaking Nigerian law. And so this Sunday Jackson disarms this person with a knife, protects his own life. He's going to prison and now faces the death penalty. And Fulani militants just roaming bands of them with AK-47s, and that's no problem. You are so right about this question of prioritization. I know I'm over time, Mr. Chairman, but I appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Mr.
But particularly, the United States is concerned and outraged by the ongoing slaughter of thousands of Christians in Nigeria by various ethnic militias in the Middle Belt, as well as terrorists like Boko Haram and ISIS West Africa in the north. It is tragic and it is unacceptable. Churches are burning, villages are being razed, thousands are killed, clergy murdered simply for wearing a cross, for being a Christian, for daring to say they worship Jesus as Christ. Just yesterday, 25 little girls were kidnapped from their school, and one school official murdered trying to protect them, from MAGA Comprehensive Girls Secondary School in Kebbi State. Colleagues, this is happening. It's undeniable, and it's unacceptable. The United States condemns these attacks in the strongest terms, and it demands accountability. And as President Trump has made clear, we will not stand by while such atrocities are happening in Nigeria. The government of Nigeria must take immediate steps and do more to increase security, respond to early warnings, end impunity, and address the drivers of violence.